Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show. And this is the Harmony, Your Path to Wholeness channel, where we bring you interesting and experienced guests to help you on your path to wholeness in the future. Today will be no exception, but first, let's welcome co host Kathleen Beauvais. Hi, Kathleen. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you so much. And thank you also very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate having you. And as Peter mentioned, today we are so excited to welcome Fiona Demark. Fiona is an inspirational speaker and resilience coach. She helps to build awareness of disability and how everyone can overcome life's challenges. Today, she is here to yak with us about building resilience. So let's just get started. Fiona, you have 25 years of experience in helping people with disabilities and health conditions. How do you help them develop resilience to help them overcome their challenges?
I think, Kathleen, it's about finding people's unique gifts. And quite often, especially when you have a disability or a medical condition, or, we all face those sort of challenges in life, it's
Mhm.
really easy to get stuck in that negative thought pattern and think about all the things that aren't possible and all the things that are going wrong. And so to actually help people change their mindset and say, you know what? Like, yes, that may all be happening, but you have choice and control in the way that you think about things and the way that you can react to situations, and to swap people to having a bit more positive mindset.
Mhm.
hmm So I've got one for you, Fiona. In the 25 years you've been helping people, do you think society's encouraged people to adopt a sort of victim mentality to excuse not getting on with their lives?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. The structure of things have changed a lot over the years, in the sense that we've kind of had a swap, but I don't know whether it's necessarily been a great thing. So I think at one stage it was kind of like, let's people with difficulties, troubles, disabilities, whatever it happened to be, were kind of all sort of segregated off into a different space. And it was kind of like, well, the assumption was is that you weren't going to particularly, have a particularly great life. So therefore let's just assume that you're not going to do well. And therefore there was never that pressure. And now I think, society has changed in the sense that, we've all become a little bit sort of, we've all heard the term helicopter parents. And I think in some instances we've removed people's capacity in a different way, in that we're kind of doing everything for that next generation. And look, I mean, I'm a parent of two young adult children myself now, and it's really interesting to have watched that change, where we're not building resilience anymore necessarily into our young people. It's kind of like, oh, you poor dear, we'll do something for you to help you, which is fantastic in the essence where that help is needed. But then it kind of seems to have become a little unbalanced in some ways. And so I
Mhm.
think, now we've gone to this other extreme where people are losing that capacity to develop skills as well.
Right. Yeah.
So you mentioned about the attitude about building resilience is all about changing the mindset of how you look at a certain issue. But how does when confronted with any problem whatsoever, how do you change that mindset? I mean, how do you instruct somebody that they have control over their thoughts to change that, to reframe what's happening in their lives? What is the method that you use in order to help people change that?
It's not it's not a simple process, in the sense that there is a little bit of sort of work that needs to go into it.
Mhm.
And I guess the main thing is someone's got to be in a position where they're wanting to make that change.
Mhm.
And essentially, if you're not in that space where you're ready to make the change, then it becomes even more difficult. But I think it comes back to that point of, you know, same situation can happen to two people. It's your choice to react in two different ways. And so, one person may see that as a situation where they go, oh my gosh, like doom and gloom, life is over. And
Right.
then the other person may go, well, you know what, like that's what I've sort of, come across in life, and let's move forward with it. And so a lot of what I work with is assisting people to work out what it is that they could now do in the future with the current circumstances or situation that they're faced with. So rather than sort of sitting in the past and ruminating about how they could have done things differently, or the way things used to be, or that this particular situation has had a dramatic effect upon their lives, to actually say, well, you know what? Yep, that's happened, and that's made you part of who you are today. But it doesn't have to dictate what your future looks like. And so then sort of get people to actually expand out and say, okay, well, what do you want your future to look like? And if that be the case, what are the steps that we need to take to get there? And what are the things that are now maybe stopping you from doing that?
Right. What are some accessible adventures for people with disabilities? Because you mentioned that on your website, and I was just wondering what type of accessible adventures there are for people with disabilities.
Accessible adventures was something that I created to prove that anybody can do anything they put their mind to. It may need to be structured differently. It may need for the person who's supplying that particular service or activity to think differently in the way that they provide, the service. However, just because you've got a disability doesn't mean that if you decide that you want to go skydiving with your family when you're on holiday, that you shouldn't be able to go. And so it's actually looking at the structure of generally sort of more adventure kind of type activities to say, okay, well, if someone had a disability and they wanted to participate in this particular thing, what would we need to do to make that happen? And how can you support people to be able to do that and to show that you're willing to take that on? So, you don't have to say, I'm accessible and sort of say, okay, well, bottom line, everybody can come. It's more to say, okay, we're open to having this conversation. So it's a little bit sort of like saying, well, we're disability friendly. We'll work with you to see whether this is possible. And in some circumstances, it may not be possible for somebody to do some kind of activity due to safety risks or not having, access to alternative equipment or something like that. However, having said that, for organizations or providers to be open to that idea of everybody can come and participate, and then let's work backwards from that to see whether that is actually possible or not.
Excellent.
And it's amazing when you start looking how many supposedly difficult activities can be slightly modified to make them available for disabled people. I was watching a documentary about Britain just the other day. Somewhere on the East Coast, they have sailing dinghies, and they have a harness and a crane, and they help people who can't use their legs get into these little sailing dinghies, and off they go. They're having a whale of a time sailing around the bay or the lagoon or something in the dinghies, and then they come back and they have to get helped out. But they've had their fun, and they enter races with fully able people and compete on equal terms. So that was one that I found very interesting. Yeah. Here's one. In your experience, if people overcome lower level challenges, and we all have those challenges, as you said, does that set them up to handle the big challenges that come along later in life a little bit better? Does resilience build incrementally? That's what I'm trying to ask you.
Yeah, I think so. It's just like, it's exercise. Like, you can't expect to go and run a marathon if you've been sitting on the couch for the last, year doing nothing. Yeah. So, and resilience is very much the same. Like it's taking those baby steps and building that resilience in situations where, maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe today I went to the bus stop and the bus was driving up the road and I'd missed it by, a minute. And okay, well, that has the opportunity to make me feel, oh, okay, well, that's fine. There's another bus in 20 minutes time. Or go, oh my gosh, my day is doomed because now I'm going to be late and blah, 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 blah. So it's about starting off with those small things and saying, well, you know what, like if I can manage those things, when those bigger things come along, then those things are not going to be as difficult to deal with because I've already built that momentum of
Mhm.
being able to manage the small things. And it doesn't mean that, if you're experiencing sort of, grief or loss, for example, or, something else has, happened that's quite dramatic, doesn't mean that you're just going to go, bam, today I'm going to feel positive. It's, we all do need that time to sit back and go, well, you know what, that was an awful situation and I feel bad. And, we need to take that time, but it's about the time that it takes you to come back from those situations and say, okay, I can only sit in this space for so long before I have to continue moving forward again.
hmm And you brought up, if I may, Kathleen, follow-up question for Fiona. You brought up marathons. I'm speaking from experience, but I found the discipline of and overcoming the pain and the sheer agony of running. I did ultra marathons, 50 milers.
Oh, wow.
That really helped me when I hit some non-physical challenges later in life, between medical problems and surgeries and just the bad stuff that happened in Zimbabwe. Just thinking back to the way you finish that marathon or ultra marathon is just putting one foot in front of the other and keeping on doing it, and just focusing on that one foot. I was able to use that to get me through other stuff. Have you found that with people that you help as well, the sport connection?
It's actually really interesting in the sense that tends to be two different types of people, and there's that idea of one foot in front of the other. Let's just do what we can do right in this moment in time, and you don't like what the end goal looks like in some
Mhm.
ways, but you're not focused on that. You're just focused on the here and now. What do I need to do in this next moment to get through this situation? But then there's other people that actually are really forward focused, and they use that goal at the end they just envision. So in this
Mhm.
instance of the marathon, they envisage themselves going over that sort of the finish line, and that enables them to put that one foot in front of the other. So it's really interesting. Our brains depends on how you're wired as to
Mhm.
whether you need to do the moment to the moment thing, which is very much the way I operate, versus people that have that longer term perspective, and they see the goal and then they just keep on working towards that big goal.
Mm. I would venture to suggest they're not mutually exclusive. And thinking back to my own experience on the marathons, particularly, both at different times and at different levels of discomfort, one becomes more important than the other, and then it may change around. Interesting observation. Thank you, Kathleen.
Well, I'm actually interested in hearing a bit about your own story, Fiona, and what inspired you to help other people overcome their challenges.
Yeah, so interestingly, I grew up in a town in outback New South Wales, so very much sort of red dirt and kangaroos bouncing around kind of type of Australia, and it was although it was a large town, it was quite isolated, and so our closest capital city was about 5.5 hours drive away,
Oh, wow.
and it was a situation where I grew up and I was diagnosed as being legally blind when I was very young. And so the resources were really poor in that situation for having supports in place. So, many people just automatically assume that someone in my age bracket, especially, would know how to read Braille. And it was only fairly recently that I thought to myself, well, why don't I understand how to read Braille? Because it was something that I was never taught. And I realized, well, probably the reason I wasn't taught is because the resources weren't there for me to be, there was nobody there that knew how to teach me. And so essentially it was very much a learning curve of work it out as you go and think outside of the square. And look, I mean, I think my parents had a very hands-off kind of parenting perspective, and so it was very much build your independence and fight your own battles and see where you end up. And that built a lot of resilience in me when I was quite young. But also, having said that, sometimes I think, I got to the point where I was kind of floundering a little bit. And it wasn't just the disability, there was a lot of other stuff that was going on in relation to sort of, I guess as a teenager, you have to navigate all of these life challenges just being in that age bracket, and I was bullied at school. One of my
Mm.
parents passed away when I was still in high school as well. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and I actually was clinically depressed at one stage, but not in a supported situation, in the sense that I was never actually diagnosed. And so there was a lot of stuff going on, and I got to the point where I really did probably hit rock bottom. And I had a conversation with a teacher at school, and they weren't afraid to ask some of the tough questions. And by asking me the questions about where I was at the point in time, I sort of realized that potentially my own situation gave me the capacity to think forward and to be able to use my experiences to help other people. So from that, I realized that I could go away and go to university and study social work, which is what I did, and then have added various qualifications on top of that since, to then extend that out to helping others, because I sort of figure, if I can get out of my own situation and then use that to help other people, potentially that's maybe why I was given the disability, if you like to think from a sort of big universe perspective. I think, that's a skill that I've got. So I've got the opportunity to say, well, you know what, let's use that for good.
Yeah.
Well
Good for
done.
you.
Very good.
Yes.
Very
Yeah.
good. On your website, you have one in particular and a couple of others, unusual hobbies, and you have a claim. And I don't want to give the game away if you don't want to talk about it. We won't press you, but I think our audience would be very interested in some of your hobbies and things that you get up to. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, look, I'm a very naturally adventurous person, hence why I've got into the whole accessible adventures thing. But the secret sort of, a bit of a hobby that I do, well, it's not really a secret, that is that I do pole dancing. And immediately sort of that has some connotation of, some, smoky strip club, and that's definitely not the type of pole dancing that I'm doing. Um, I started it's probably been about 2.5 years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. And it was something I'd always wanted to do, dancing of some description. I always thought, oh, that'd be a great way to keep fit. And then I sort of thought, okay, well, what kind of dancing can I do? And suddenly I thought, well, I would like to not have to rely on having somebody that I had to take, like, have a partner to do the dancing with. And then I thought, well, the other thing is that as soon as you do some kind of partner dancing, then it means that you've got to be mindful of the fact that you need to sort of, maybe disconnect and reconnect with somebody. And when you're both moving parts, that's very difficult when you can't see where the other person is.
Right.
So I kind of figured, well, if I'm dancing with a pole, then I've only got me to worry about, because the pole's going to stay in one spot. So I figured, oh, let's give pole dancing a go. And what I love about it is really, really challenging, in the sense that to do all of those tricks and clever stuff, it
Yeah.
is actually very physical. And
Yeah.
so
I don't
not
doubt it.
just a challenge. Yeah, so it's not just a challenge to learn how to do the dancing or do the tricks, but to actually be able to be physically fit enough to be able to pull them off, and to be trusting in yourself to be able to say, well, you know what, I can let go with my hands and just be sort of holding on by, pieces of skin behind my knees, or whatever it happens to be, that
Wow.
you think that sort of it's sort of like defying gravity in some ways, but it's yeah, you've got to sort of have faith in the fact that everything is going to sort of, work out the way it should.
Oh, very good. I got to ask you something else on adventure and scary stuff. Being legally blind and having very poor vision, I gather, does that make it easier for you to do some of the scary stuff that people who can see properly can't do? I'll give you an example from my personal experience. In Toronto, we have a thing called the CN Tower, which at one point in time was the tallest building in the world. I think it's been surpassed. And I can't remember how many floors it is, Kathleen, 50, 60 floors or something.
Oh gosh, can't remember, Peter.
And on the observation deck, there's a glass floor. Now,
Oh, yes.
I've done all sorts of scary stuff. I've flown single-engine planes. I've been in a fighter plane. I haven't jumped in a parachute. I've ridden horses in endurance sports and fallen off. And I had to walk across this glass floor. When you look down 50 floors and see cars the size of like match heads, I really struggled. My two sons, they were then early adults, straight across, no problem. My partner, who's scared of something, she went across. With me, just the fact I could see through it, I did it eventually, but I had a huge problem. And I know people tell me about walking on like rope bridges across deep valleys is really scary. I didn't have a problem with one of those. Do you find that it's easier for you when you can't see the scary bits underneath you or not?
I'm not sure. And it's very interesting that, fear, it ticks everybody's box differently, doesn't it? It's it's
Yeah,
it's an
yeah.
amazing
Sure.
thing. Yeah. But look, for me, I think in some ways it probably makes it more scary.
Mm,
So I'm like, whoa, that's even better. But then in other ways, I don't know, maybe it probably does remove the fear, but then you still look, I mean, I've done the glass floor thing, and for me, I could see the buildings and sort of some stuff below me, but probably didn't have as much perspective. So that wasn't scary. More things, what terrifies me actually is things in the water, and I'm not a particularly strong swimmer. So the most scary thing I think I've ever done was jet skiing. So my
Oh,
husband and I
wow.
have spent lots and lots of times on his sports motorbike, and that is absolutely
hmm
fine. I figured, you know what? The jet ski is just like a motorbike in the water. I'll be fine. No, it was not quite the same thing. I didn't take into account that there was going to be, bumps from the waves. And
Right.
we've all heard those horror stories about jet ski accidents, and I'm like in my
Mhm.
brain, just don't fall off, don't fall off, don't fall off. And I'm like, wow, this is actually really terrifying. But and in that instance, I had to have full faith in his capacity to drive this jet ski. And I mean, at the same time, my then 16-year-old daughter and her best friend were zooming along on one beside us. And I figured,
Yeah.
well, if they can do it, like I'm sure I'm safe. So yeah, it's just again, it's just working out, I guess, different things tick boxes for different people.
Mhm.
Right. Right. Oh, interesting stuff. Kathleen, back to you.
So tell us about some of the unique challenges for someone who is visually impaired about, you're a mom and you have a career. So what are some of the things that you have to overcome?
I think uh, it's about adapting to what you can
Mhm.
and letting the stuff go that you can't. So I think if I was concerned about all of the things in the world that didn't turn out correctly for me,
Mhm.
and it was going to be sort of, something that stressed me out, I'd be a very stressed out person. I think having a good sense of humor is really, really important, because
hmm
sometimes stuff just happens, and sometimes literally you have to laugh or cry. And so and it can be big things, or it can be really small things, and it could be something as simple as there's a water pipe that may have burst on the footpath on the way to my office, and all of a sudden, I'm just bopping along on my way using the white cane, assuming that everything's fine, and then all of a sudden there's this construction that's just magically popped up in front of me.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that suddenly creates a huge hazard
Mm.
for me to then be able to just do something that should have been something that was much more simple. So there's those things. It's even when I think about it, like just everyday life is quite fatiguing, in the sense that for many people, simply again, just walking down the street independently, you don't have to think about it. It just becomes
Right.
like one of
True.
those subconscious things that's just happening, and you can have a conversation on your mobile phone, or be listening to some music, or looking at the cars driving past at the same time, and you don't have to just be totally focused. But for me, that kind of activity means that it takes my full focus. So
Mm.
by the time I go and do a day in the office, for example, and this is the beautiful thing since COVID, that we do have flexibility to sort of do that hybrid working option, is that the days that I go to the office, I'm literally exhausted by the end of the day, because even just getting up to go to the toilet or get a glass of water you've really got to concentrate.
Mhm.
And so those things that everybody else takes for granted
Right.
sometimes are more taxing. But then there's bonuses and things as well. So it means that I do literally have a better sense of smell, and so um I can take advantage of that. I've got probably better taste, better memory. So there's all these other things that have sort of my brain has then sort of said, okay, well, if you're not using your energy on that, let's transfer it to something else.
Mm.
And so I've probably got different and better skills in some areas than what I would have if I didn't have the disability. So it's all a bit of a sort of it's like everybody's life. Like there's some things
Right.
that work better than others, and so it's about playing towards your strengths rather than the weaknesses.
Sure,
Excellent.
sure.
Yeah.
And I bet with your pole dancing expertise, you've got better balance than most people too. So,
Quite possibly.
Sure.
At least, when I'm on the tram or the train, I can always sort of just hold on to those poles really easily.
yeah.
Right.
Good one.
Oh.
So, Fiona, a question for you that we ask all our guests on this channel. A lot of people are struggling with what's going on in the world. I don't need to go into the details. And Kathleen and I are not full of gloom and doom, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are. So, and a lot of people shouldn't be, because they've got lots of good stuff going for them, but they can't appreciate it. What's one bit of advice you would give to someone who's not very happy with life, that they can start doing tomorrow or today to give them a little bit of a rosier outlook on life? Is there one thing you could tell them?
Oh gosh, only one. I think to be kinder to yourself. So like catch
Okay.
those negative thoughts when we spend so much time with that little voice in our head telling us all the things that we can't do, all the things that we're bad at, all the things that we're failing at. And instead of listening to that, actually pull it up and say, hang on, how realistic is actually what I'm telling myself? And then change it and say,
Mhm.
and even think, like, would you say those things to somebody else? Like, would you say
Right.
that to your child or to your partner or to your best friend? And the answer is most likely no. You would never even dream of being that sort of, mean to somebody else. So why do you be mean to yourself? So
Right.
yeah, just that little bit more kindness to yourself. And then obviously once you're kind to yourself, that kindness then often extends out to other people as well.
Sure. No, very good advice. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Kathleen, back to you.
Well, we are running out of time here,
Yeah.
Fiona, but please tell us how people can contact you.
I am all over the socials. So if you
Okay.
type in my name, Fiona Demark or
Mhm.
Blind Inspiration, I will pop up. People can also contact me via my website, which is fionademark.com.au.
Fantastic.
Right. .au. Get that. And just a quick mention to audience, we've had for you yet another really interesting guest from the other side of the world from North America today. To make sure you don't miss out on the interesting guests we have coming up for you, hop onto our website, theyakkingshow.com, hit the purple button and sign up for our weekly newsletter. We only send you one email a week, and we'll tell you who's coming next week and who's on this week. And that's it from me. So thanks again, Fiona. Lovely meeting you, and very interesting hearing your story. And I'm sure you're helping a lot of people. And thanks to the audience for listening. And back to Kathleen.
Yes, thank you, Fiona, for being with us today. It was really inspiring. And thank you all so very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciated having you. If anyone is interested in being a guest on our show, please visit us at theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the Contacts tab, where you will find a short application form, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.